I'm out at Glendale National Cemetery today because we're headed out to some of the sites where the actual Battle of Glendale would have been, also known as Fraysers Farm. Now, the 2 days prior to June 30th, Robert E. Lee was on the attack. He was pushing McClellan as far as he could. And McClellan seemingly wanted to complete another location or set up another camp where he could have a supply line out where the James River was. So he's moving himself closer and closer to that river, as he's also fighting off the enemy, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. With Beaver Dam Creek happening over near the Chickahominy, and the battle that happened right after that with Gaines Mill, we get here to this location at Fraysers Farm. Now, the place is also known as Glendale. The property today is a private property, so you can't really get out there and do much. But there are a couple of stops along the way that's going to help us with orientation, and perhaps I can bring something to you so you can be able to see how this battle unfolded out here prior to the Malvern Hill battle. So once we're done here with this battle, it rolls right into Malvern Hill, and that pretty much does it for the 7 days battles. The Confederates, even though it's kind of fought to a draw, if you can, on that, they are pretty much victorious because they keep the Northern Army from taking Richmond. And that is what starts the Army of Northern Virginia's fiery rampage during 1862 on into 1863 before the massive defeat at the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, hopefully you can see behind my shoulder here, there's a sign right across the street. That sign over there indicates the location roughly where that farm is that we were talking about, Fraysers Farm and Glendale. It sits north of this cemetery that we're in right now. Most battles in those days was usually named after a course of water or sometimes a farm or a piece of land, like Gettysburg, Manassas, for example, and this is no different here. So it's named after that property. That property happens to be private property today, so we really can't get on that property and check out anything. There are sections of land out here that the American Battlefield Trust are trying to save. Gunshots. That they're trying to save from destruction, really. And you can go over to their website and check out the efforts on American Battlefield Trust. Now, on the morning of July 1st, 1862, in this location here where the sign was placed behind me on this road, Lee ends up meeting Jackson and Longstreet. This is after Glendale has already concluded, and they're sitting out here thinking that McClellan and his forces are trying to get closer to the river, and that the Union is weakening out here on this position. So he wants to prepare an attack and hit him as quickly as possible. So they meet out here, and then they decide to travel southward towards the Malvern Hill area. And that's what starts the plans itself for the Malvern Hill battle. Now, even though it doesn't turn out to be the best plan possible, and the Confederates are pretty much unsuccessful at dislodging the Union Army here in Malvern Hill, the overall plan itself for the 7 days battles and the aggressiveness of Robert E. Lee leads to the Union Army abandoning their plans here and moving into another phase of the fight in 1862. And so that's where we're standing right now, right across the street from the actual Glendale National Cemetery. Now here in a second, I'm going to walk up on an intersection where the Willis Church Road runs across, which is what I was driving on to go to that cemetery. This section of crossroads is what the United States Army was trying to protect and defend, because this was the passage point for their army to converge here in the wagon trains to get towards the James River. This is where McClellan wanted to set up shop, down near the James. And if they protected this point from the Confederate Army, then they would be able to successfully pass through here. Well, Robert E. Lee kind of sensed that that was what was going on. So he ends up sending his army down in the same direction here and meets him here at what would be called the Glendale Fraysers Farm battle. Now at this particular spot, McClellan meets his soldiers out here, and he starts talking to them about what is expected of them. And he tells them, you have to protect this line. Our wagon trains have to get past this point. Once they are past this point, you may proceed down towards the James. And that's exactly what the Union Army intends to do. Now, Alexander Porter, for the Confederate Army, said of this place that of all the chances that they had to win their independence or win this war, he thought that this was the greatest chance that they had. That had they beat the Union Army here at this crossroads at Glendale, that they would have secured their victory from this war. Now, what would a fight outside of Richmond be without a good old Thomas Stonewall Jackson controversy? So I'm here at one of the pontoon crosses, the bridge crossings that were put up by the Federal Army at White Oak Swamp. And at this location, the Federals moved their soldiers across as fast as they could so that they could put up a defensive work across this river or this swamp. And Richardson and Smith's men are up on a rise directly behind me here. And Jackson gets to this point. He can hear the crackling and the popping of the guns off in the distance at Glendale Fraysers Farm. And he sits here not knowing what to do. He has vague orders. He could try to punch through the swamp and try to attack. Robert E. Lee needs him to attack, needs him to punch through this location. But instead, he sits on the other side and he settles for an artillery duel. Well, as you know, historically, artillery duels never go well for Confederates. They never really hit their targets as good as the Federal cannons do, except for the exception maybe places like Fredericksburg. So he's on this side here. Lee needs him on the other side, and a lot of people said that because he did not make it across this swamp and join the fight, that was the primary reason why Robert E. Lee didn't secure the victory at Glendale's farm the way that he wanted it. So history is definitely not on their side at this point at the swamp. And of course, the swamp itself is a big barrier for both armies, the Union and the Southern armies. Crossing this swamp is just a nightmare for a massive army with tons of men, wagons, cannons, and things like that. Federals get here first, they build their bridges, then they burn their bridges down. The Confederates, really no way for them to get across without those bridges up. So there is reason to understand why Jackson couldn't get across here. So I'm walking down along the roadside here now to kind of get a look at the water that courses through here, where Jackson's men were kind of frozen in time, where the bridge was supposed to be in order to get across. Again, this is a crossing that the Union Army used to get some of its forces across this water and to help it cross over the area where White Oak Swamp is. We'll show you that here in just a second. So as you can kind of see behind me here, that swamp stretches out. I mean, it's pretty massive. Getting bridges built here and getting troops across is probably an extremely difficult thing to do. And as I'm looking out, the main portion of water is right here. But if you follow me around to this direction here, I don't know if you can see it or not, but directly behind me there, that swamp is just stretching way on out there. And we've recently had some rain out here in the Virginia area. The rain's definitely going to add to it, but it's just a massive swamp. So it's very difficult for anybody to be traversing, especially on foot. Here in just a minute, I'm going to pass by a portion of land that I can't access because it is it's private property, and there's really no place to pull off either in order for you to stand by the roadside and take a video or a picture. But I'll do a drive-by of it and slow down the film so that you're able to see the position itself. And the reason why this position is important is because of the fight that was supposed to happen here. Now I'll pull this video up while I'm talking about the things that were happening in this location so that you'll know what I'm talking about. Now the fight itself was supposed to take on 3 fronts. Lee was supposed to send 3 different sets of troops and hit them and converge them together in one point and attack them on those 3 different sides, causing chaos, confusion, and a major problem for the Union Army. In this particular position, Brigadier General Henry W. Slocum's division was positioned astride the road to block the enemy's advance. Slocum had reinforced his infantry here with a powerful force of cannons facing over the fields of the Brackett Farm, which is the location that you're seeing now. In the late afternoon, a Confederate division commanded by Major General Benjamin Huger appeared across the fields before the northern line. Having begun the day only 3 miles from that critical intersection near Glendale, Huger had been ordered by Lee to open the assault by advancing along the Charles City Road. Delayed by his own caution and by obstructions placed in the road by Slocum's men, it took him nearly all day to reach the Brackett Farm area. There, the sight of the Federal line dissuaded Huger from making an infantry assault, and he opted for artillery bombardment instead. The Union cannon replied, and an indecisive artillery exchange raged here for the rest of the day. So essentially, what you have at Huger's position is failure. He's not doing his job. He gets his men out to that position, and he delays, and then sees the men before him that's supposed to fight, and he essentially gets scared of that fight. He thinks he's going to lose, and he stops. That is yet another thing that causes this position here for Lee to not turn out to be what he wanted it to be. The fight did not go the way he wanted it because his officers did not carry out the orders as they were given to them. And that is pretty much what is going on at this position and why it's so important. So here in just a moment, I'll take you out down the road called the Longbridge Road, which is where the majority of the fighting happened for Glendale or Fraysers Farm. Down that road, Longstreet was positioned, along with AP Hill, and that was the main frontal assault that was supposed to take place. Huger is off on the left-hand side. Jackson's coming up from another position, and where they're located, if they attack simultaneously and they hit them properly, it's going to be a kind of a shocking assault, and they're going to push those men back onto each other and do a lot of what Lee was known for doing, hitting them on multiple fronts, pushing them back against each other, and then creating chaos. While they're waiting, they're listening for noise, they're patiently trying to see if there's a fight actually happening. Lee is not getting where he wants to go. So, at about 5 p.m., Lee decides that he's going to get Longstreet out there and get him fighting. He sends Longstreet up the middle, and they do the majority of the assault right there. Now, in that position where Glendale is, and this Longbridge Road, the fighting was so intense that one man said that if one bullet flew past his head, 1,000 bullets flew past his head. And then in that position was one of the rare spots in the American Civil War where hand-to-hand combat actually took place. So here, Glendale Farm, or Fraysers Farm, was one of the most intense fighting areas of the war. And today, it's broken up into a bunch of different little pieces and roads that converge through there, and you can't really do anything about it. There's no way to preserve that battlefield, and there's no way to really get out there and see it because it's all private property. So after waiting in vain for hours to hear the sounds of an assault from either Jackson or Hughes's fronts, Lee felt compelled to initiate the action. About 5 p.m., he ordered Longstreet forward, astride the bridge road. After a short advance, the Confederate infantry encountered the Federal division, commanded by Brigadier General George McCall. Thus began a series of hard-fought engagements that raged across this area for the next 3 hours. Many of these contests occurred at close ranges or involved violent episodes of hand-to-hand combat. One of McCall's men, Private Michael Miller, remembered that if there was one ball whistled past my devoted head that day, there was thousands. The positions of several Northern artillery units became the centers of intense fighting as reinforcements for both sides joined the battle. The Southerners eventually forced McCall's troops to retreat, but were halted farther east by Federal units arriving from near the White Oak Swamp. These Union soldiers sealed the break in the line shortly before darkness ended the battle. This is where Glendale Farm leads us. It brings us over here to Malvern Hill, where Lee thinks he's going to break this Union position and sever the United States Army and create a complete victory here on this hill. It does not turn out to be that way for him, and the United States Army is able to get back into their boats and go back down the James River, and the fight for Richmond is pretty much over with at that point. The plans that the grand scheme that was put into place has failed, and Little Mac is going to have to start all over again. And Abraham Lincoln, of course, is going to be completely taken aback by the failures that have happened out here, and he's not really ever going to trust his general again. So it's been real fun taking you out here over the course of these roads. If you come out here to try to see Glendale Farm, there's not a lot of places to pull off. There's not a lot of places to see. You're more likely going to have to go over to Malvern Hill and just kind of go through this battle site first, and then understand by looking at some of the wayside markers what we're looking at. So unfortunately, that battlefield is not preserved like this place is over here. But American Battlefield Trust is actually trying to preserve some of those spots so that future generations can get out there and see it. So go over to their website, and if you can donate. Otherwise, read about the battle, and I hope this video has done something for you. Until next time, that's History with Waffles.